Hi there. This is a revision tutorial video covering aspects of the economic cycle. It's designed for Year 1 macroeconomics students. Here is the data for the UK showing the level of real national output, that's GDP adjusted for inflation. And hopefully you can see, if you follow the red data line here, that there is an economic cycle apparent for the UK since 2003. Part of the job in Year 1 macro is to understand the different stages of an economic cycle. So let's try and explain some of them. When GDP is growing quickly, then we say there is an economic boom. And I think it's fair to say the period from 2006, for example, 2007, we were growing pretty quickly. Growth was pretty substantial, well over 0.5% per quarter. So I think we could probably call that a boom up here. And the growth rate slows down. Notice that the blue bar lines slow down, particularly in the first quarter of 2008. And that will be a slowdown. The economy is still growing. It's not quite growing as quickly as it was. That's called an economic slowdown. And then, of course, we get into the recession years when the red line is falling. The level of actual GDP is declining. And you can see that the British economy had nearly 6 quarters of recession here. So that's a recession. Before the trough was reached in the cycle and national output started to recover. Slowly at first, but certainly a recovery phase was happening. So essentially there are 4 stages of the economic cycle for you. Boom, slowdown, recession, recovery. Has there been another boom in the UK? Well, the growth rate has been fairly steady the last 2 or 3 years at around 0.5, 0.6% per quarter. I think as we go into 2015, there's a hint here of a slowdown. I don't think we've really had a boom in between. Can you see there that the blue quarter-on-quarter growth rate is nudging below 0.5%, which suggests that possibly the economy is slowing down. So I've got bad news for everybody. We've missed out on the boom this time. One way of showing the economic cycle is to think a little bit about the PPF curve, a bit of microeconomics. A short-term cyclical recovery in the economy, or a boom if it's particularly strong, effectively represents an increase in short-term national output. So we're using up unemployed labour, we're utilising more efficiently and more intensively our existing land and capital resources. In other words, we're moving from inside the PPF boundary closer to the PPF frontier itself. So an economic recovery, a cyclical expansion of output, is essentially a movement towards the production possibility frontier. Even though the British economy has been growing since the tail end of 2009, not every industry has grown. And this is just an important point here, that GDP is an aggregate measure of national output. And of course, if you look what lies beneath, you'll see what's called sectoral or industrial differences. So professional business services seem to have been growing quite quickly. So to retail, wholesale, transport, communications, etc., hotels. But actually some sectors, finance and insurance, is actually smaller than it was in 2009. The electricity and gas sector. And there's been quite a steep decline in the value of production in mining, falling global prices, and also, of course, in North Sea oil and gas. So yes, a recovery in the economic cycle for the UK, but a big variation in the growth of output between different sectors. This chart, of course, you may have come across if you are an avid reader of the Bank of England's inflation report. And I know that most of you probably are, so you've already seen this chart before. It's the famous fan chart showing the bank's forecast for the growth of GDP in the years ahead. This one comes from their 2016 inflation report. The thick black line is the actual data, the actual rate of growth in the economy. Notice the slowdown as we head into 2015. But the economy growing. And then, of course, the fan chart fans out. The range of possible outcomes gets wider the further we look ahead. And this is an important evaluative point, that no economic cycle is ever the same for any one country. And no cycle is the same between countries, because their economies are different. Developed and developing countries are very different. Even within rich advanced nations, they have different sector imbalances or what have you, different issues to address. So as you head out into 2017, 2018, the bank's forecast widens. The darker the green line is the closest to its central forecast, and they're forecasting growth of between 2 and 3%. It's just a small chance of another recession before 2019, but of course, as we know, the bank's been wrong before. Indeed, forecasting is particularly difficult, especially about the future. So why is it that it's hard to forecast the growth of an economy? Why is it difficult to predict the next stage of the economic cycle? The point I'm making in this final slide is that there's no macro model of the economy that can actually really get to grips with the volatility of lots of the various parts of the macroeconomic jigsaw. So forecasting GDP growth is particularly difficult. In fact, some people say it's something we shouldn't do at all. Just a few reasons on my graphic here. First of all, it's consumer confidence and business sentiment is subject to uncertainty and volatility. The exchange rate, of course, can move up and down quite significantly, affecting the competitiveness of industries which trade. We know that the world price of key commodities, oil and gas and copper and coal and foodstuffs, can be quite volatile from year to year. Nobody's ever quite sure, economics is a social science after all, how people and businesses will respond to a policy change. A tax cut, for example, or perhaps even, lo and behold, the Bank of England starting to raise interest rates. And I think it's quite important to recognise that macroeconomics, the economic cycle, is the aggregation of, or the sum of, the decisions of hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of businesses, as well as consumers. Nobody can be quite sure how many workers businesses are going to be taking on, how many jobs will be lost, how many new jobs will be created. It's all very uncertain, and it means that we can never be sure what the likely growth of GDP is going to be, even looking a year or more out. Here are some key economic cycle concepts for you. If you want to write some of these key definitions down for your revision notes, just press the pause button. I won't hold it against you, and hopefully they'll be useful. So there we go. We've taken a little look at some of the aspects of the economic cycle. Hopefully our little trawl through the data has been useful for you. And check out our YouTube channel and of course the Tutor website for lots of resources added every single day.